Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to remind you that if you haven't yet, I would love it if you left a rating or review on the podcast or even subscribe to my YouTube channel. Totally up to you. Just a reminder, you can also watch the recording of every podcast now on YouTube, and you can see me in these cool gamer headphones that every time I go to record, I'm like, I just really hate these. But anyway, I want the audio to be good. I want you to be able to hear me well. And one way to do that is truly just to wear these. So I know you don't probably care all that much, but today we are really just going to kind of jump into today's episode. There are some updates that I have in the personal realm of my life, I guess. I always think it's fun to kind of catch you up, kind of share a little bit of what's been happening this last week since I last recorded, and also to let you know what things are going to look like as I enter into my postpartum era. I hate the word era. It just reminds me of Taylor Swift. Anyway, enter into my postpartum period of time and what you can expect from the podcast. So this last week, we had our 3D ultrasound and we got to see baby. He, I think already is camera shy or a little stubborn, which is probably likely. Knowing my husband and I, he probably will be a stubborn little guy. But we had them look obviously at his face, and he had a hand in his face for the first photo, so we could just get like a little side profile. And he has just the cutest little nose and plump little lips, and oh, I just cannot wait to meet him. I feel like it's coming so quickly, and I'm so excited about it. And then when we went to look at him again on the ultrasound, he had both hands in his face. So he just didn't want to be seen, and that's fine. We are now to weekly appointments, so we will be going back to the clinic. I am 37 and a half weeks, which I always kind of hesitated sharing that because I didn't want there to be pressure about or people asking when I would have baby or all the things. But you know, we're all friends here. I really am not stressed about it. I honestly just ask for your continued prayers as I enter into these next few weeks. 'Cause I was telling Nathan, it's kind of like when you have studied for an exam and you know this exam is coming, but you don't know exactly maybe. And I guess this is not the most perfect example, but like you have an exam, you have an end date of when this exam is going to be, but that exam could be pushed up at any time. Like that teacher just wants you to know what to do. And for 2 to 3 weeks, it's like you need to know all the knowledge for the exam, not ever really know when the exam's going to happen, but you know by a certain date, hopefully the exam has happened. And it's kind of just like that lingering, like, I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, I'm sure if you've had a child or you're pregnant right now, you maybe can understand of like the butterflies kind of in your stomach, like knowing at any time this deal could happen, but also not wanting to, wanting it to happen too soon, or also not wanting to put all your eggs in one basket that'll happen on a certain day and then it just doesn't. So I think I've maybe been a little bit more on edge probably the last couple of weeks just for that reason. Physically, I'm feeling really, really good, and I'll share more about kind of how I'm supporting my mind, body, and spirit when I get into that section of the podcast. But outside of that, then on Sunday, we had a bridal shower for my friend, and it's truly just so fun to celebrate friends as they transition into different seasons of life, like marriage or having babies. It's just such a special time. And with this friend, I'm not able to go on her bachelorette party, and so I was just hoping and praying that I would make it to her shower, which I did, obviously, and got to put that on with my mom and another gal. And it was really just so fun. Like I said, I love being able to celebrate friends in different seasons of life. It honestly just makes me very emotional. I'm a little probably more emotional now anyway, but it really is just so special to see the people that you love fall in love and just enter into marriage or enter into having kids. It's just the coolest thing. So that was really fun. And I'm trying to think of what else has happened. Not much. Honestly, we are just settling in. I guess I should say we also finalized a name, which I told my husband, we don't have to stick with this name if he comes out and you're like, he does not look like he should have this name. But I was able to then order a sweater on Etsy that has his name kind of embroidered in it. That will be how I announce what his name is. And so I'm so excited. The name has felt so aligned with me for so long. I feel like it's kind of the only name that's really stuck. There's just so many names out there, and I feel like boy names are really hard, and there's a lot of good names, but imagining like you calling your child this name or that name it's just a whole different ballgame. Like I remember in high school, I still have the list in my phone of boy names, girl names, dog names that I liked when I was in high school, and I still do like a lot of them. But when it's your child and you're responsible for naming your child, it's a lot of responsibility, and you want to make sure you don't rush into giving them a name. But also, obviously, when they're born, I want them to have a name right away so we know what to call them. Anyway, so that was just really something in the last week I got ordered, and it should be coming this week. So fingers crossed we're able to have that. I've also been packing my hospital bag, baby's hospital bag, all the fun things, that you just have to be prepared for. So that's kind of personally what's been going on. I'm honestly not sure what I'm going to share when I'm not pregnant anymore, because it seems like it's all that I talk about and update you on, but it's because it is, like I've said in the past, like the number one thing happening in my life. So it's hard not to talk about it. And I also think before I got pregnant, I didn't maybe have a lot of interest in pregnancy content or listening to people talk about pregnancy. But now I'm just like very curious how people are approaching it, how maybe people are doing things a little bit differently, or just, I don't know, recovering. Postpartum is going to be a huge piece of the puzzle for me. And I actually had a call with a company that specializes in postpartum recovery tools. So I'm really excited to integrate those into my lifestyle. It's a company that I trust, and it's just really cool. I'm going to be able to work with them and also just see how their products benefit the body postpartum, because they're very into using herbs and different supplements to support the mother after she delivers. I think there's just a lack of education around postpartum, and I've said this before, which is why I've released last week's episode about postpartum prep and how I'm preparing for it. Obviously, I've never experienced it, so it's going to be totally different when I'm able to take you with me in real time to talk about how my body's healing and how I'm supporting my body after I give birth. So let's jump into how I'm supporting my mind, body, and spirit. This first one, if you live in the Midwest and you've also had a heat wave this week, is not anything rare or new, but getting outside, shocker, we all know this, getting outside just totally can change your mood, and it truly has. Yesterday, I was able to get outside for about a 45 to 50 minute walk, and once I got back to our yard, I just stood in the sun and did some breath work, and I just came in feeling so much better about the day. I didn't have any calls scheduled. Well, I had calls scheduled yesterday, but no client calls scheduled. So I was able to have a little bit more flexibility in my morning routine and just take some time to truly be outside, get some fresh air, and it makes me so eager for spring to be among us. How I'm supporting my body. I shared this on my Instagram story, but I've actually been adding in AMRAP workouts, and those are doing as many reps as possible within a time frame. And so for me, or for these workouts, it was a 4-minute time frame. You're usually going between 2 different exercises. Now, I follow Sydney Cummings workouts, and if you've been here from the beginning, I don't know if I actually shared that she was the trainer that I followed very religiously when I was in my over-exercising, under-eating 1.5 to 2 years. Or just really did not have a good relationship with exercise. So getting back into her workouts is definitely something that I'm trying to do gradually. I told Nathan, it's like, man, I've got the hit and I just want to get into it again. Her workouts are so intense and they make you feel so good. So I don't want to scare you away from doing them. I genuinely love them. Her previous workouts were usually scheduled for like 6 days a week. They're usually 40 to 45 minutes. They've definitely been adjusted now. I know she's had a couple kids, or maybe I think she's pregnant right now, actually. But I just love her workouts. I have tried so many different platforms, and I also love Form. Form is a great platform. I have a code as well if you want to get money off of that. I just share that because it's a great program, truly. But for free, I like to train with Sydney Cummings. And again, her workouts are just intense, but they make you feel so strong and so good. And I'm like, I have to just savor every day that I can work out with her until I deliver, because then I have to take some time off and focus on, slowing things down, building up that core strength again. And obviously it'll be about 6 weeks before I'm cleared to do those types of workouts. And I don't want to push it. I'm somebody who usually does push it. And I'm trying to really be good about not doing that to my body, knowing that recovery will be a lot easier if I just truly take things slow. But like I said, I like the AMRAP workouts because I really think it's going to help a lot in labor, and especially like working through contractions, which there's a episode I recorded with Stacy. It was about kind of pregnancy, exercise around pregnancy throughout your lifespan, so not just pregnancy specific. And she had talked about how when she was expecting, she would do longer durations of work and then rest for, maybe that 1 to 2 minutes, and then do like a 3 to 4 minute sprint of work, and then again rest. So having those longer work times, I feel like it just pushes me so much harder mentally. Honestly, way more even than physically. Like physically, yes, it's a challenge, but knowing you have 4 minutes and you are going to be working the whole time without resting, it's very intimidating, or it can be very intimidating. And for me, I've honestly felt it to be very encouraging because I'm not dying in these workouts. Like I really still feel strong, even though I'm working for longer periods of time and having less rest. So I've loved those. I love training with her. If you're looking to get into strength training, but you want a higher level of intensity, I know Pilates is really big right now, and Pilates is way harder than we give it credit for, but I am just a tried and true, give me a strength training workout with minimal rest, get my heart rate elevated. Like I love that type of workout, and I find I always gravitate back towards it. And then how I'm nourishing my spirit, you will not be surprised. Usually this is how it goes, but I think the adjustment I've made is I've not been forcing myself to fit into a certain time frame when I do this piece of my routine every single day. I think in the past, I used to force myself to be up by like 5 a.m. every single day, honestly, of the year. It didn't matter what the season was. 5 or 6 a.m. I would get a workout in before I would eat anything. And I would then eat a super high protein breakfast, and then I would just roll into my day, and I didn't have a lot of time to just be or just exist. So I'm trying to enjoy sleep and rest while I can, and also understanding my body needs more rest right now. And so I've been getting up around like 7:30 to 8 o'clock. I know that's actually sounds really late, but mostly my calls the last few weeks have been in the evening, so I'm not really trying to start working too early because I honestly just long term cannot put in 10 plus hour days like I've tried to do in the past because I thought I needed to morph into a specific schedule. So I've been waking up, doing my typical like washing my face, brushing my teeth, making a breakfast, and then I'll come into the nursery and I'll sit on the rocker that we have in here, and I will do or read through God in My Everything. That book I've talked about a lot. I read one chapter every day. Or I at least try to, and I just sit in here, drink my water with some minerals and some lemon, and read that book. And I also have incorporated breath work into this, so I really like to do the 4-count inhale. You take a sip of air at the top, and then you exhale for 6 seconds, and I will start with 6 seconds and work my way up to exhaling for honestly as long as I can. So sometimes it's like a 20-second exhale, but really just like expanding my lungs. And I've noticed that this is really helpful for me because when I start my morning later, there's these old patterns and beliefs that I have around starting your morning later, right? Like you're lazy, you're not going to get enough done, you're not going to get everything on your to-do list done if you don't start it right now. You don't have time to do your devotional, you don't have time to sit here, you should have made breakfast a little bit faster, you've already wasted an hour in your day. Like these thoughts go through my brain and they are so present. I want you to know that because it's not like I just wake up later and I'm like, oh man, we'll get to whatever I get to today, it's fine. No, my brain still is constantly reminding me that I'm not doing enough, even when I am, because it's just old patterns and old belief systems that I'm still very, very actively working through and working to ignore. And so that breath work has been really big to do before I actually start reading, because it just helps my nervous system settle down a little bit. It clears those thoughts out. I think of those thoughts that are in my head so crammed, and with every exhale, I'm releasing those thoughts. And it's that visualization practice of like inhaling, feeling the weight or the intensity of those thoughts, exhaling and watching them all disappear. And I will do that for as long as I need to until I feel like my mind is truly a blank slate. And that can obviously take anywhere from like 10 seconds to a minute. It just really depends on the day and kind of the schedule of my day. So that's really how I've been supporting my mind, body, and spirit. Again, I usually open every episode with a little bit of a catch up and that section, because I truly think that we have to have alignment in mind, body, and spirit to achieve ultimate or true wellness. But that doesn't mean each area is going to always feel supported or always be perfectly supported. I would say in the past, most often my mind is what gets ignored. And so now that's what I'm trying to kind of bring to the top, and I'm trying to give my body enough rest and tap more into that. So it's always changing and adapting, but we just cannot expect to feel 100% if we're not giving attention to all those areas. Like I said, it doesn't mean they have to all look perfectly. So today we are talking about you're doing too much, okay? So realistic daily rituals, lowering your expectations, optimizing your time, and identifying patterns of overconsumption. We live in a busy society, okay? We know this. I share on this a lot, how we kind of pride ourselves on being busy. Being busy has become like a status symbol that you've got it all figured out. And the more that I look at that, the more I realize that if you pride yourself on being busy, it shows you probably have a lack of boundaries, or you are neglecting another area of your life. If you are really busy at work and that is 100% of your focus, you're probably neglecting your spouse or your children, and it doesn't even need to be to an extreme amount, but like, if you find there is one area of your life that takes up 90% or 70% of your time, and you fill that bucket every single day, all day long, and you give no attention to the other buckets of your life, like social time, your health, your family, your friendships, your religion, or spiritual practices, right? Like if you are ignoring all the other buckets and your one bucket is overflowing, you have a lack of boundaries. And so this can be really difficult to both admit and make changes around. And the reason that I wanted to touch on this is because I talk a lot about inflammation. Well, the root of inflammation is stress, right? Stress leads to inflammation because your body is perceiving all of these things that are maybe showing up as symptoms as threats, right? So your sympathetic nervous system and your hormones start to signal. So cortisol and adrenaline, right? Your fight or flight response. That is a good reaction for your body to have, is to be in fight or flight if you truly have a stressful event occurring in your life. However, for most of us, that is not something that should be happening. I mean, for any of us, that's not something that should be happening all the time. Your body should not always feel like you're in fight or flight. One way you could identify this is by doing blood work, and they can actually test like your cortisol peaks and then dips, and then also when melatonin is produced, which typically happens in the evenings, or it should. Also, if you're waking up around like 2 to 4 a.m., could be showing signs of dysregulated cortisol. Again, this hormone response to stress should not be happening for all of us. Not everybody should struggle with sleep. You really should not struggle to fall asleep, and you really should wake up with energy. That is how your body is kind of wired to perform. However, when we are so overwhelmed and so stressed and our body is responding, because our body doesn't know the difference between being chased by a bear or having an email come through from your boss, that stresses you out a little bit, right? Like that's maybe a more negative email. Your body's still responding the same way. It's trying to protect itself. And stress isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Too much stress is a bad thing. Too much inflammation within your body chronic inflammation in your body is a quote bad thing, okay? Acute inflammation, yes, that's like cutting your arm, having a wound that probably heals within like 7 to 10 days to 2 weeks. Chronic inflammation is a persistent issue that has occurred because your body's been under prolonged stress for way too long, okay? So I wanted to give you some statistics about society and stressfulness, or not stressfulness, just stress in general, or our routines or schedules in general, because like I said, we live in a very busy society. And so I just went into ChatGPT and I'm like, give me some statistics around work and stress and productivity that happen within America. And so if you want to fact check me, totally fine. I'm not pulling all of this from my own brain. This is coming from cited resources that I found on ChatGPT, but I thought it was really interesting and I wanted to bring some light to it. So on average, Americans are working 1,783 hours per year, which comes out to about 47 hours per week. And I feel like there's a lot of things that have contributed to this. One being COVID, where most people work from home. So that boundary around work for a lot of us has probably been crossed. I know for me it has. I feel like for my husband it maybe has as well, just because you can work at any point. You can have your work email on your phone. You can check email on a Sunday, on a Saturday. When you're technically not working, you can still be working in that kind of like, I feel like that activation in your brain can be turned on of like, I'm always going to be thinking about work because I can always be notified about work. And if it's a Friday afternoon at 2:00, like I really should be working, even if I've already worked 40 hours this week or 45 hours this week. And so again, like that boundary just really gets crossed. And so I feel like that normal, like working 9 to 5 is not normal anymore. It's more so like 8 to 6. And so you can even see that in like most people on average. I think in the past it was like working 40 hours a week. Now we're up to 47 hours per week. I also wanted to say, if you are a breastfeeding mother, I wanted to give you statistics around this too and how much time this takes up in your year actually. So for the first 6 months, around 900 hours you will be breastfeeding your child. For the next 6 months, 419.4 hours. That varied just based off of the duration that you're breastfeeding and how many times per day. So total hours throughout the course of a year is 1,319.4 hours, or 55 consecutive days over the course of a year you are actively breastfeeding. And so this is something too, if you are a working mother, right? You're working outside of the home and you're breastfeeding, like think of how many hours. So that's like, almost 3,000 hours that you're putting in, both combining breastfeeding and working a full-time job. It's crazy. So then you can think like, I have no time in the day, or I have very little time. And I'm going to talk about that and kind of touch on some common things that I hear from clients and what we can do to really set boundaries and identify what is something that needs our time and what we maybe have continued to do out of habit. All right, so then kind of continuing on with this, 70% of waking hours for most people are spent on work-related activities. When it comes to phone usage, the average person is spending 3 hours and 15 minutes per day on their phone. And when you look at just either moms working within the household, right? So working mothers that are working a full-time job or part-time job and also have children or a spouse or food to make, they spend on average 13 hours per week, whereas fathers spend 7 hours per week on household activities. Most people are getting 6.8 hours of sleep. Really optimal for men would be about like 6 to 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Women really need like 8 to 10 plus hours of sleep optimally. And then this is kind of the biggest one here that I saw, was that 60% of adults feel stressed on a daily basis, and 73% of them say they don't have enough free time and feel overwhelmed by busy schedules. 73% of people. It's insane. We have gotten to a point where stress is quite literally killing us, and I know that sounds so extreme, but and I'm going to lay out some common symptoms or conditions I see within clients I work with. When you look at these symptoms, right, symptoms are a beautiful thing because they're alerting your body that there's something not right. At the same time, symptoms that are persistent and there's been nothing done to reduce them leads to chronic health conditions, leads to illness, leads to death, leads to cancer. And I know, again, that's very, very extreme, and that's an extreme way of thinking, but we have to think about our schedule. Like, really sit with yourself and think about, do I fall into that 73% of people who feel like I don't have enough free time and feel mostly overwhelmed all the time by what my schedule contains? And I think that's where we have to also look at how we're filling our schedules and how we're maybe even filling our kids' schedules or our spouse's schedules or our partner's schedules, in looking at it critically. Like, how many things are we doing because the person beside me is doing it, but I don't really want to be doing it? I think about sports, and growing up, like, I really liked basketball. I really liked volleyball for a period of time until I got to high school. And then I quit volleyball, and I hated track. I really liked dance. I really hated band, but it was like the people around me were doing these things, and you're just involved in a lot when you go to a small school. And I don't regret being involved in a lot. But at the same time, like, a lot of things I did was not because at the root of it, I was so passionate about what I was doing and I loved it. It was because people around me were doing it, and I felt like the pressure to also need to do it. And that's not to say, again, that I regret being involved in a lot of things, but I think once I got to college, I was able to narrow it down and be like, what do I actually like to do? I still like to dance, so I joined a dance team. But then I got burnt out with dance, and then I taught dance, and then I was burnt out even teaching dance. And again, I was continuing to do these things because in my mind, like, not doing anything was lazy, so I needed to be busy, and I needed to kind of almost continue to pride myself on being busy. And so we have to look at what we're doing and be honest with ourselves. Like, do I actually want to be doing this? And that's not to say that I think it's right to do absolutely nothing and sit at home outside of work, because we need social interaction. We need activities. Activities connect us. Shared experiences are the best way to connect with the people around you. So I'm not saying we should do nothing, but I think we need to take a critical look at what we are doing and evaluate how fulfilling it actually is for us. Or if our kids are involved in 10 plus after school activities, maybe we could, narrow it down to like 5, and just looking at what we are involved in, what the people around us are involved in. Because for 73% of people to not feel like they have enough time and to feel overwhelmed, I mean, it's hugely contributing to the health concerns that we see within society today. I 100% believe that. So common symptoms that I see among clients that are induced by emotional stress leading to physical stress on the body would be they're frequently sick. They have rashes that pop up on their skin, maybe irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut, constipation, diarrhea. Emotional changes, especially when they are obviously based in stress, can cause your digestive system to break down food differently. And so when you are eating and you're really, really stressed, so think about stress eating, you're probably going to be constipated or have diarrhea as a result because your gut microbiome is being impacted. And so with that, we have to think about, like, if you are stress eating, why, right? We have to think of the emotional response. What's an activity you could replace that physical response of stress eating with? And if you are going to stress eat, what types of foods are you gravitating towards? Because typically they also tend to be less nutrient dense anyway. Acid reflux is a big one. PCOS, weight gain, maybe rapid, or we think it's happening without any explanation. Maybe nothing has changed, or we suspect that nothing has changed, but we're gaining all this weight. Well, something's changed, right? Your body maybe emotionally is under more stress, physically under a lot of stress. It could be something very minor or very major that is impacting why your body's responding in that way. Insomnia, so not sleeping. I really like to utilize the brain dumping tool to help clients that struggle with insomnia, and obviously looking at how we're bookending our day. Like, how do you spend that 1 to 2 hours before you go to bed? There's so many factors, but I do like the tool of brain dumping. So when you're in bed, you dump everything that's in your brain out on a sheet of paper. You close the journal, signifying that we are shutting down those thoughts. And it really does help improve your sleep quality when you're able to utilize that practice and that visualization That doesn't go to say that's going to help you if you're still scrolling on your phone up until the second before you do brain dumping. Your sleep is going to be impacted, right? Just because of that blue light exposure. All right, so then we think of like thyroid stress. So hyper or hypothyroidism is a big one. I honestly feel like a majority of my clients do have hypothyroidism, and it's been definitely something that's boomed more recently. And it's just stress on, it's not just stress on your thyroid, but part of that is stress on your thyroid, right? Your thyroid is not producing enough of the thyroid stimulating hormone, or it is producing enough, but it's not converting to the active form of that hormone, impacting your metabolism. If you have hypothyroid, typically you're also more linked to have anxiety or depression. And then if you get on a medication for it, and I'm not saying that this is something I'm against, but if you were on something like levothyroxine, that also, the side effect of that is depression. So you're almost kind of like fueling the fire. And again, I'm not saying that you should never get on a medication for something. For some people, it really, really is needed. It's just interesting how, if you look at traditional Chinese medicine, the thyroid, right, being linked to that emotional response of anxiety and depression, if your thyroid is underactive, which would be hypothyroid, and then to see how the medication you could get on for it, a side effect is that. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't get on a medication if you need it, and I'm not judging anybody that is on a medication. I just think that pattern or that kind of like parallel there is very interesting. Brain fog too is another really big one. If you think about feeling overwhelmed, right? Even if you are eating healthy fats and you are moving your body and getting enough sleep, if you're stressed and you've got so much emotional stress that you can't think clearly, you're going to have brain fog. No amount of healthy fats or ashwagandha, I say this all the time because that was like, for some reason earlier this year or even last year, ashwagandha was really big among like college students of taking ashwagandha. I think it was like a TikTok trend. Like no amount of ashwagandha or any sort of adaptogen is going to support your brain if you are not actively working to reduce stress. It's just not going to, okay? So you can't take something and not make any lifestyle change or any changes around your schedule or setting boundaries and expect a benefit to come from it, truthfully. And I'm not so much talking at you as I'm talking to myself. I know that this might feel very like, okay, Bailey, we get it. You're getting a little aggressive with how you're talking about this. Everything that I share on this podcast is truly because I personally need to hear it. It's not so much because I'm trying to tell you that you need to make all these changes as much as it is I still see these patterns in myself. I still see these symptoms show up within myself. And I need that constant reminder that it is not normal, it's not okay, and it's something that I have to actively be working on and be focused on, which is why when I shared about my spirit too, it's like utilizing that breathwork practice to slow down my brain, to shut off the voice in my head that's reminding me that I'm not doing enough, that my whole day is ruined if I don't start it and have it all complete by 9 a.m. I'm actively working to shut off that voice. And that's, again, why I share these things and why typically these podcast episodes come out on certain topics is because I actually need to hear these topics, okay? It's not because I feel like you do, which maybe you do, and I hope that you always leave with a benefit or with a takeaway from every episode and ultimately leave feeling very encouraged and inspired to dive into it. But more so, it's because I need to hear these reminders, okay? And I really just want to give you this reminder and remind myself that if your body has gotten to the point where the symptoms that I talked about, and those are just a handful of symptoms that I would say clients I work with deal with most consistently, if your body has gotten to a point where those symptoms or conditions have become normal, please, 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 please work with a practitioner, get blood work done, and consider getting long-term accountability to reduce those symptoms, to ultimately manage stress, not even manage stress, but reduce stress. I think stress management is something that we talk about of like, well, just do some journaling and some breath work and then you can manage stress. It's kind of like the whole root cause approach. Like, yeah, you can do that to put a Band-Aid over your stress. And those are really, really helpful tools, right? Like I mentioned, brain dumping, breath work. But if you are not actually getting to the source of why you are stressed, what is contributing to stress, what lack of boundaries are around the stressor, what time commitment the stressor is, If it's maybe your job, like if you're not looking at other jobs or what about that job, so it's not even as like, okay, my job causes me stress. Okay, yes, everybody is probably going to experience stress at their job at one point or another. What specifically in your job makes you stressed? Oh, well, it's having to do public speaking once a week at our company meeting. Okay, so if you're going to look for a different job or you're going to find a different job, we're not going to find a job that has any sort of public speaking. We're not going to look for a job with that because it's not comfortable for you, right? Something about that is inducing way more stress on your body than it needs to. So let's look for a job, and I'm saying let's as in like you personally. I don't do any sort of career counseling with people, but it's like if that was your experience, then maybe I would encourage you, like find something that actually fills your bucket, fills your cup, because most of us are working a job or need to work a job or really do enjoy our jobs, but there's sometimes aspects of a job that you don't love, right? And I think if you notice your health deteriorating as a result of your job, it's an alarm, right? That is an alarm. That is something that is saying, hey, we don't feel safe. We don't feel comfortable. You really should look into another option. And this is really where I have so much, I admire a client of mine so much, and I'm not going to share too much because, I just don't want to share too much, but I obviously don't think it would give away any personal information about this person. But there's this client I've been working with now since October, and I've been working with her through my rebuild program. And we really, honestly, up until the last month, have primarily focused around stress, setting boundaries, identifying your self-worth, leaving a job maybe that is not supporting your well-being, causing way more stress than it should, and also then communicating leaving that job with the people around her. And that was also inducing a lot of stress. And now we are entering into the phase of working on nutrition to support symptoms and health conditions, concerns, deficiencies. But really from October until, like I said, a month ago, our focus had been around stress. And stress has so many different networks. I feel like, obviously we could talk about this forever and ever, but so many things contribute to stress. So like kind of coming back to the job example. If you're at a job and you're a yes person and you say yes to everything, well, that's not because you're just born that way. It's because at some point you've allowed boundaries to be crossed by people around you and you've just kind of dealt with the consequences. So boundaries is a huge component there. But even deeper than that is your belief that you have to say yes. So then it's going even back further of identifying, why do I feel like I can't have boundaries? And oftentimes it comes down to maybe low self-confidence or being praised as a kid for being productive or being busy or always having it all figured out, that then led you to believe, deeply believe that you have to say yes because you are the person to get it done. To have to say yes because you've always been praised for saying yes. To have to say yes because you don't want to disappoint people. Maybe you're a people pleaser and that is just like, you've been praised your whole life for just doing what people asked you to do. And so putting your foot down and saying, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this anymore and I'm not saying yes to these things that people are asking me to do. It's really scary. So like for this client, for an example, we were working on building up her self-confidence to say no, to set boundaries, to get to a point where she can communicate what she needs and what she doesn't want to do anymore. And she could find an alternative to working at the job she's in right now because it was not supporting her body. There was a lot of things, obviously, in addition to that story that were contributing to certain symptoms coming up for her. But it's like allowing yourself to actually take the time to work on stress, because we talk about stress, we talk about being busy, and it's like, yeah, there's all these tools we can do, but if you're not actually tracing it back to where is that stemming from? Like, why are you continuously letting people talk to you like that, or letting people treat you like that, or filling your schedule to the brim? Why are you doing that? And I will be honest, like, this is something I've had a lot of conversations around with my friend, just when we've been together, because it's something I'm continuously breaking down, right? Of being praised for having it figured out, being praised for working hard, being praised for doing a lot of different things, and I'm not saying even being good at a lot of different things, but there's a lot of things I'm very passionate about. Like, I'm passionate about dance, I'm passionate about my job and health and exercise, and I'm passionate about ultimately helping people. I'm passionate about cooking and making recipes and feeding people around me and spending time with friends and connecting with people. I like all these things, right? Like, and so then it's hard to be like, but where does that all fit in? Because it can't, right? And we can't continuously add to our lifestyle if something is not going to give. And so there's some beliefs around stress that I would say I hear often, or that I tell myself often, or I have in the past that I've been actively breaking down. And these beliefs around this, really, I think there's about like 5 that I probably hear the most often. The first one is, it's just a season of life. I can't do anything about it. I've heard this many times. Clients, I love you, love you, love you. But that belief that things are going to change after X amount of time is something we have to nix that narrative, because most often it doesn't, right? The most common one I hear, well, next week or next month, things are going to slow down. They won't. I know that sounds brutal, but they won't. If you think they will, they won't. Again, I know it's brutal, but they just won't. I've seen it happen, you guys, so many times, where I'm working with clients around stress and we're tracing it back to the root of where it's stemming from. And oftentimes it's in childhood, and then it leads to patterns as they become an adult and become a mother and take care of other people and then get a full-time job. And it's like that, oh, well, I'm not getting any sleep. I'm not really eating. I'm eating very distracted. And yesterday I stress ate because I was so overwhelmed. But I know next week things are going to get a lot better because this project at work will be done. I understand we're going to go through seasons of life where we can't control the stress in our life, maybe, or we feel like we can't control all the stressors in our life. And sometimes it feels really, really heavy, and that the weight of the stress is stacked up against us and we can't do anything about it. But we have to learn how to adapt and how to support our body through it. It's very similar to how I say you don't have to love your body in every season of life, but you need to support it. Similar to this, you don't have to perfectly manage stress in every season of your life, but you need to support your body, right? There are things you can do to support your body, and they still need to be executed even when your schedule looks a little crazy. And that's not to add more fuel to the fire, but typically the stress reducing techniques or habits that you have integrated, or even just the beliefs around yourself, when those are prioritized, or even when that is shared with people close to you that you trust to kind of give some of the load to, you are going to feel so much better. Other things I hear is, I have to work on my weekends, otherwise it won't get done. If your schedule, right, if your job says on average you should be working 45 hours a week, and you still don't have a project done that is now taking 60 hours of your week, you are crossing your own boundary, and work is allowing you to cross that boundary. Again, I'm not saying that you should just, not do anything and, whatever, your work can deal with it, because that's not going to fly for everyone. But it also then requires you to think about, okay, this was supposed to take me this amount of time. It's now taken me twice as long. Why is that? Have I been distracted? Have I been scrolling on my phone? Have I felt so exhausted and so stuck in that cycle of stress that I just cannot think straight? If those are kind of some of the reasons, it's like, well, then how are you supporting your body so that you have more mental clarity, or that you can remove some distractions like your cell phone from your environment and really sit down and focus on the task at hand? Because I think another big piece of this is our brains are always all over the place. And having distractions, having your phone notifications on all the time is really contributing to that. For most of us, probably. I will speak for myself. For me, that's what it contributes to. If there's a task that I need to do and it's taking me twice as long, it's probably because in between working on this activity, I've scrolled on Instagram, I've opened up Facebook, I've opened up my work email. And it's all things you do to distract yourself from what really needs most of your focus, okay? So for me, it's like I've had to take a really more critical look at myself and be like, okay, my computer and my phone need to be on Do Not Disturb all day long, every single day. And by 8 o'clock, my phone needs to be put away, because otherwise I will utilize that to distract myself from other things happening in my life, or I will use that to distract myself from being actively present in my relationships, in my friendships, in my household, which never feels good either. Okay. Another one here, beliefs around stress, is I'm sleeping less because I need to work. I need to get it done. I really admire, I had a friend share this with me that she works from like 11 to I think 4. And I shared this last week's podcast because I admire it so much. And I feel like even her just sharing that with me has given me some freedom to not feel like I have to be in that cycle of working for a specific amount of time because the people around me are. My husband works a lot of hours right now because it's tax season, okay? He's a CPA. And so if I'm at home and I see him working more, it makes me want to work more, because what else am I going to do, right? Like, what am I doing? Who am I if I'm not working? And so it's breaking down that belief that like you can really set boundaries around when you're going to be available to people. And I think that will overall reduce the amount of overwhelm that we feel as a society, right? And I talked to a little previously about if you're going to add things in, you need to think about what else you're removing. I have a client who's very near and dear to my heart, and we got on a call last week and she was telling me all these new things she's going to add in. And this is a client I can have a little more tough love with because I've been with her for a while, and I just know she's the type of person that can handle it. And I'm like, okay, so what's going to give? And she like looked at me and started giggling. And I'm like, I mean, what's going to give? You have to give me something that you are going to take off of your priority list if you're going to be adding in something. Because we need to break down how many hours a week this is taking up in your week, right? So if you decide to do this thing, that is how many hours are you thinking a week that it's going to take? Okay, so where are you going to give up 5 hours of your week? What are you doing right now that is taking up 5 hours of your week that will have to be put on the shelf and come back to at a later time because you're pursuing something else? And she's like, I don't know what's going to give. And I'm like, well, we can't keep functioning at this level. Like, we cannot keep doing this to yourself. You cannot keep doing this to yourself. And again, I say all of these things out of love, and I say all of these things and share these things with you because I need that reminder. A huge blessing about my job is that I'm actively reminding clients around these things and about these things, which is a reflection back on me of like, I can't be a hypocrite. If I'm going to expect somebody to dedicate X amount of time a week to doing a stress-reducing activity, to adding in brain dumping to their evening routine, and minimizing screen time 2 hours before bed, I cannot be sitting here on my bed an hour before I'm about to go to sleep and be scrolling on TikTok or on Instagram without any blue light blockers on and with continuously overactivating my nervous system. That doesn't fly with me because that's being hypocritical, right? If I'm going to ask something of the person I'm working with, I need to be reflecting that. And so it holds me accountable. The podcast also holds me accountable because I'm sharing these things with you because, like I said, I need to hear them, but also I want to actively practice the things that I share because I really think if you're going to listen to somebody's advice or get feedback from someone or work with a coach or a practitioner, they should be practicing what they're telling you to do. And if they're not, you need to take a step back and look at them and be like, is this really the person I want to be taking advice from? And that's not me saying I have all the answers, because I promise you, and you know this by now, hopefully, fingers crossed you do, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. I share what I'm learning and I share what I know. Doesn't mean I have all the answers, but I do think it is helpful for you to leave each episode with some to-dos, right? Every client I work with one-on-one leaves with an action plan for the next week. 3 things that they can focus on in the next couple of weeks that's going to support their body and the specific issue or concern that they came to me with. So these are some things we're going to do about this, and I'm going to actively be doing it with you, okay? So the first thing here is to create a list of things, that you need to do today. This list should be 3 to 4 to-dos long. if you are the person who sits down to make your to-do list and there's 600 tasks on there, we need to reevaluate, because yes, sometimes days are going to have more of a load, but you probably will not get all of those things done. If you do get all those things done, you're going to hurt yourself in the process, because you're going to not allow any time for you to probably eat, drink enough water, move your body, get up and move around, go to the bathroom. You're going to neglect your body if you are consistently writing out even 10 to 12 things that you have to do that day. Okay, so you're going to sit down every day within this next week and you're going to come up with 3 to 4 things that have to be done that day. All right. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to write down 3 to 4 things that need to be done that week. And then you're going to identify what day that's going to be filled in, right? Because sometimes having a weekly overview on your schedule can be really helpful. I love that. I use Notion to kind of lay out my schedule and see what needs to get done. And I think it's really helpful too, because then you can see like, okay, yes, I'm putting pressure on myself today to record a podcast, but I actually could do that tomorrow, or I could do that on Friday. And it doesn't need to be done today, even though right now I feel like it needs to. It's not a need, it's a desire, because maybe I would like to have more time on my Friday. But if I'm going to hurt myself in the process of getting that podcast recorded today, it's much better for my overall health if I push it to Friday. Third thing here is then laying out the things you need to get done this month. So you're looking at your daily overview, 3 to 4 things. You're looking at your weekly overview, 3 to 4 things. Where's that going to fill in? Looking at your monthly overview. Okay, what's something that needs to get done this month? Maybe it's 3 to 4 things. For me, I know something that needs to get done in February is writing out my expenses and my income and expenses for my business, because my husband's going to ask me for that while I'm on maternity leave, and I'm not going to want to do it. So that's something this month yet needs to happen. And as you can see, I've been putting it off because this month is quickly coming to an end and it's not been done yet. So that is something in my month I know it needs to get done. Doesn't need to be any specific day, but before March 1st, that event needs to happen. The second thing here is you need to identify if you're holding yourself to certain standards based on habit or based out of need. Now, this is where I have broken up with my morning routine, truthfully. And I don't say that because I have no routine. I still follow a routine in a sense, because I do believe there's a lot of power in bookending your day with health supporting activities. However, in the past, regardless, like I had said, of the season of life, stage of life, it would look like waking up at 5 a.m., getting to the gym by 5:30 a.m., being there for an hour, then coming home, having breakfast, showering, jumping right into my day, my work day. Well, now, in this season of life, I've realized it's actually not that beneficial for me to force myself to be getting up at 5 a.m. As much as I would love that for myself, it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. So the stress that I was inducing on my body just by setting my alarm for 5 a.m., never actually getting out of bed until at 5 a.m., honestly, not until, like I said, 7:45 or 8 a.m. right now, it was too much. And I was like, why am I doing this to myself? If I don't have client calls at 9 a.m., which some days of the week I start work as early as 9, but that's not every day. So like, why am I still forcing myself to fit into the mold of working a 9 to 5 job when in reality, like I work from about like 8:45 to sometimes 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night. And so I need to adjust and adapt my morning routine to mimic how late I'm working. Otherwise, I'm doing too much and my body is working too much, and it's a lot, right? And I can't do that to myself. So I've broken up with my morning routine, and honestly, having such rigid structure, I also, instead of going and working out in the morning right when I get up, I make a breakfast. I fuel my body, I fuel baby's body, and I drink water. And then I typically will do my devotional. Then I will go and work out. Then I will probably go for a walk. And then I'll kind of ease into my day, right? Some days it is a lot earlier than others. Today it was like 10:30, 11. And I know that's a privilege to share that. And that is, again, not every single day is like that. But I needed to get away from believing that I needed my schedule to look a certain way, when in reality, like, I'm the one who's responsible for it. Those are all habits that maybe are super healthful and health supporting, But if you are forcing yourself to do something and it doesn't really feel instinctively aligned at that stage of your life, it is okay to adapt, right? So stop holding yourself to a certain standard if it's not a need, if it's not a basic need, right? Maybe it's just become a habit, and that habit, although at one point was really health supporting, right now is not. I know at one point in my life, waking up at 5 a.m., getting in a workout before I would go to work was really health supporting. My mind, truthfully, more than anything, needed that time. Now, it was hindering my health, truthfully, to force myself to get up that early. And so I had to evaluate that and adjust that. Number 3 here, what can give? Okay, so like I had said with that client example, if you're going to be adding things in, you have to consider removing something else. As much as we love to think we can do everything all the time for everyone around us, and we can be those people pleasers or those yes people or cross boundaries, we have to think about what can give if you're going to actively be adding something in. And then number 4, I want you to really reflect on this last year and what did you say yes to, or even reflect on this last month. What did you say yes to this month that you need to put a boundary around or say no to if you get asked to do that in the future? And I feel like I have an endless amount of these things because in the moment things sound really good. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do that. And then as I'm like working on it or I'm working up to it or I'm actively in that season of life, I'm like, why do I do this to myself? Like I remember talking to someone, I was like, I'm so sick of myself. Like, why do I keep saying yes? I need to, use the, let me discuss that with my husband and I'll get back to you, right? Or use the, let me discuss that or let me think about that a little bit more and then I'll get back to you. Utilizing just a little bit of a break because, and Lauren Bosnick was sharing this on the Skinny Confidential podcast. She's like, if it doesn't feel aligned right in that moment, it's not going to in 4 days, right? If it's not something you really are excited about and want to do when you get asked, it's probably not going to change. And I'm somebody who loves to kind of gaslight myself or convince myself that, well, I can say yes now, I can push it off, and then whenever it comes, I'm going to be really excited to do it. No, usually that's not the case, right? So it's then narrowing it down to what did you say yes to this month that you probably will not say yes to again because you didn't really enjoy it? Or what did you say yes to this last year that ended up being a lot more stress than benefit that if you get asked to do that again, you're probably going to say no. Again, though, saying no for some of us can be really difficult. So we have to trace it back then to where did that come from, right? Where did that inability to say no to people stem from? And what can we actively be doing to build your confidence around that so that when you get asked again, it's not like, oh yeah, I can do that, no problem. It's honestly, last year that caused a lot of stress on me and my family, and I didn't really feel like I was able to give my full energy and attention to it. I'm going to have to pass. And you don't even have to give an example or give an excuse, right? You can just say, no, I'm not, I'm sorry. Or maybe you're not really sorry, but sometimes I usually still say sorry because I don't know, it just feels better. And I do truly have empathy. Like when I say no to things, it's usually really, really hard for me to say no to things because I like to do a lot of different things like I shared before. But we have to, again, evaluate, like, is it a wholehearted yes? If it's not, like, it probably will not be. So kind of flag that too. If you have it in your calendar, like go back and flag it, highlight it in red and say, no, next time we're not doing this. Next time we're saying no to this. And it's not a bad thing to say no. It is an okay practice to have and to be comfortable doing. All right, so we're going to kind of wrap this up by optimizing your time and removing distractions. So I want you to look at your daily phone usage right now. And if you notice that number is higher than what feels comfy, or like I had given that example, if you notice you're spending more time doing tasks than you would ideally like, it's probably because there's a distraction that is in your way. And I will just say from personal experience, it's usually a phone. So looking at your screen time and then having the goal of each day this next week to take 15 minutes off of that time each day, right? So if right now you're spending 4 hours on your phone per day, okay, well today you're going to try to do 3 hours and 45 minutes. then 3 hours and 30 minutes, and just working yourself down to a point where you feel comfortable with the amount of time you're on your phone. It doesn't feel like you're on it too much, but it also is still, a helpful tool in your day-to-day life, because some of us kind of need our phones for our jobs. And so it's going to look different for everyone, right? But getting that time down to a point where it feels comfortable and you notice that you're able to get a lot more done in your day because you're not scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, or honestly, even just the stress of filling every blimp in your day with scrolling. As much as we can convince ourselves that that is your time to relax, I know I've told myself that in the past, like, well, I'm going to scroll on TikTok on a Sunday afternoon because it makes me feel relaxed. No, it makes me feel extremely stressed that I'm not doing enough, truthfully. So I deleted TikTok off my phone. I deleted Snapchat off my phone. And I will never probably go back to having them because it just was not benefiting me. And it wasn't actually reducing the overwhelm that I felt. Also, maybe setting some no phone zones. So for me, one that and this is very maybe TMI, but I want to put a no phone zone in the bathroom where you're on the toilet, you are brushing your teeth, you are washing your face, you're in the shower, you're not listening to a podcast, you're not listening to music, you're not scrolling social media or responding to a text. That is your time to go in there, do whatever task needs to be done, and come out and resume daily life. So that is one boundary that I'm personally putting around optimizing my time and removing a distraction. Maybe establishing a Sabbath that allows for socialization and not scrolling would be really beneficial for optimizing your time. Again, if you feel like I'm always working, I can never see people, maybe that Sunday is your day to socialize and to allow people into your home, to allow people to enjoy a meal with you, to go and see family. And I think for everybody that's going to be different. Like if socializing gives you energy, then maybe that's how you want to spend your Sabbath. If socializing depletes you, maybe you don't want to spend time with people. And that would be removing a distraction, would be being around people. And then finally, think about what your ideal day of rest would look like. What activities would you include within your ideal day of rest? And what's really interesting is I actually asked this question to my Inflamed to Inspired group coaching group that I'm leading have been leading for the last 7 weeks. And I asked them what their ideal day of rest looked like, and none of them had said, oh, sitting and scrolling on my phone for hours, or watching or binge watching a TV show. None of their responses included any sort of screen time, which I think is really interesting because typically we like to kind of like put those in the compartment of being restful, but they're not actually being restful when we think about the activities we would fill an ideal day of rest with. Oftentimes, I've noticed as I ask this question to people, it is not being on your phone. So I know our phone can get blamed for a lot, and I don't want to continue to this is a horrible analogy, but beat a dead horse. I feel like that's, I don't know, not a good analogy, but you get what I'm saying. I don't want to feel like I'm always coming back to these things and talking about, stress or being on your phone or all these things you should be doing, because I know it can be repetitive, but I think the more that we hear something, the more that I hear something, the more inclined I am to actually do something about it. So that is why I share that and really share that you're probably doing too much, and there's some things that might need to give in order for you to fully support your body and reduce those symptoms that are showing up for you as a result of emotional stress. And I've shared this in the past too, but there was a season of life I thought that I had irritable bowel syndrome. I thought I had leaky gut because I felt like I had the stomach flu for weeks on end. And when the primary stressor in my life disappeared, I felt great. I felt totally fine, back to normal. And at the time, I didn't recognize it was because I was under so much emotional stress that I was literally making myself sick because I was not setting boundaries, because I was not taking care of myself, because I was not letting my body process the stress that I was under. I was just trying to continue to ignore it and go. And I was a pretty unhappy person at that stage of life, and I felt miserable. And most often I will say your gut reactions, that irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut, constipation, diarrhea, probably what I see most frequently, or at least have in the past. More often it's been some other concerns that people come to me with, but those have consistently been on the top of what clients will will share with me. And that emotional tie, you guys, is so strong, and it really, really impacts that symptom. And so if we're not working on that emotional component first, we can't really ever get to that. I mean, we do eventually get to the nutrition piece, but it's not like, oh, you have leaky gut, stop eating gluten and dairy and you're going to be totally fine. No, if there's a very deeply rooted emotional connection to what's going on, or really deeply rooted stressor that you've not identified or haven't worked through, it's going to be hard to notice improvements in how you feel. Again, I share that from my own personal experience. So there is a lot that went into today's episode. I know, kind of all over the place. And like I said, I don't always want to reiterate this like stress narrative, this busyness narrative, or getting off your phone and spending more time in real life type of narrative. But I think that reminder, like I said, is just good to have and is something that I continuously need. And so hopefully it's also been a good reminder for you. Really utilize those 4 to-dos that I mentioned in today's episode. If you feel like you struggle with some of these things, again, think about what you need to do today, what you need to get done this week, what needs to get done this month, what could be added in if you have extra time. Also, what can you say no to, because in the past it's not really served you super well and it didn't really make you excited or eager to do that activity or that action in itself. So, all right, let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So, dear Lord, just thank you for the sunshine and just the ability that the sun has to give us energy and help us see a light at the end of the tunnel for these dark winter days. I pray for whoever's listening to today's episode, and if they're feeling just such a physical response to the emotional stress that they're dealing with, that they really just give themselves time, give their body time to sit alone, to process this emotion, or to sit with somebody they love or trust and really digest like what is going on, and that you just make it known to them what needs to give in their life in order for them to physically and emotionally feel supported. Lord, I just thank you for whoever's listening to today's episode. And as always, I just really pray that this episode serves them well, that they feel encouraged and inspired to really take care of their body and pursue a deeper connection with you as a result of supporting their mind, body, and spirit. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, so if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, Bailey Seaton everywhere else, and then my email will be in the description of today's episode as always. I am actually releasing a course about the foundations. I'm going to talk all about the foundations on next week's podcast episode, because they are so valuable and so neglected. And so if you are interested in that, I'm going to have the details for early sign up and a discount code in the description of today's episode as well. So be sure to check that out if you are just interested in taking care of your body for minimal investment, and really just know there are some foundational things like water and protein, sleep, boundaries, stress that maybe aren't being supported. That would be just such a great place to start. Also, updates for the podcast. I really do plan to continue to podcast after I deliver baby. This is something I love to do, and it's been a great outlet for me to just share and connect with community. So I do plan to still be around postpartum, folks, so you can't get rid of me that quickly. I have a couple episodes that are pre-recorded that I'll probably release the Wednesday of my delivery week, whenever that is. But outside of that, you'll probably still hear from me, hopefully. Don't hold me to that because, of course, like I've shared 100 times, I don't know how I'm going to mentally, physically, emotionally respond to that whole period of time and to taking care of a baby, but I really do plan to be back on the podcast as soon as I can. So have some grace with me in this season. I know you will, because you are kind, lovely people. But lots of changes happening here. I still want to be able to support you if I can. So like I said, that foundations course is great. Otherwise, you can always tune into the podcast, and I hopefully can serve as a resource to support you here too. All right, so with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.